Hello everyone, and thanks for joining me once again for this video. Today we will discuss semantics. We will see why this is important to take in consideration when you are building your website. We will see how to make sure in Oxygen when you are building your page that it will output semantically correct code, and we will also see how OxyProps will help you to save a lot of time in this process. Before we jump into Oxygen, we will have a look at the standards, and in the video description you will find timestamps you can use to jump to specific sections of this video. So we are in W3 School in the HTML semantics area, and we can see that semantic elements are elements with a meaning. So when you are building your page in Oxygen, you often use divs or sections, and what the HTML standard tells us is that divs or spans are elements that have absolutely no meaning. They tell nothing about the content, and there are semantic elements like form, table, articles, header, nav, sections, etc. that can be used, but I would say that must be used to define the different parts of your web page. So if we take this simple layout, for example, we could imagine using a div for the header, for the nav, etc. So you imagine that you can use div for creating all those containers, and as each of them have a different meaning, we don't want the output code to be only divs, but we want each container to have a specific tag defining the content of the container, like the header, the footer, a section, an article, the aside, and a navigation. If we go to the HTML standard, you can read the chapter about semantics and go to chapter 4, the elements of HTML. And in this chapter, you will find every element defined by the HTML5 standard. And for each element, you will find the specification and what this specific element represents. So here we can learn that a section element is a thematic grouping of content. An article is a complete self-contained composition in a document, page, or application, etc. So the main takeaway here is that you don't want your site builder, whether it is Oxygen or any other site builder, to output code full of divs for everything, but you want it to output code with semantic tags that define the content of each container you spend a lot of time to build on your web page. So now that we know what semantic tags are, let's open Oxygen and start building a page. So I will create a new page and call it Semantic HTML, publish, and edit with Oxygen. So first, let's do something very simple. We will add a section, and I will open the structure panel so you can see it. Add a heading, a text, and a button. That's what you will do to create a hero section. Let's add spacing by adding a gap. And just with this, let's save and look at the output HTML code. So that's the front end of our site. Let's inspect. And Oxygen did output this code. Let's enlarge it. So we have our section. So this is a semantic tag. We just want to make sure that this is our intent. Then we have a div. Then we have a h1. For now, this is correct. But then around our text, that could be our tagline or a subheading, we have a div tag, which has no meaning. And certainly we would like to have a p tag for a paragraph here. And the button that was added is a tag for a link. And we would like this to be an actual button. So let's go back to Oxygen and see how we can improve this. So by selecting my section, I have this tag drop down here, and I can select a different semantic tag for my container. So if this is my hero section, maybe section is okay, but I could change it for a header, for example. And as Oxygen doesn't list all existing semantic tags, when you want to add a different one, you can just select use custom tag, and then you can type whatever you want. Make sure that you use the correct syntax for a valid HTML tag when you use a custom tag. So let's select my text, and I don't want it to be a div, I want it to be a paragraph. So I'll select a p tag. And for my button, well, you see that unfortunately we cannot modify the button tag. So maybe we can try a different way. Let's add a text link. And for my text link, I cannot modify the tag. Maybe a link wrapper? No way to modify it on the link wrapper. So the only way to have a proper button in Oxygen is to create it from scratch by adding a text for example, applying a custom tag of button. To make it look like a proper button, I can use the class o-btn from the OxyProps framework. Let's save and have a look at the output code. And here it is. This is our new code. So now we have our section. We have the inner wrapper, which is a div with no meanings. That's totally fine because that's here only for cosmetic reasons. The Oxygen section inner wrap is the container that defines the width, the constrained width of your page. But then we have a proper p tag for our text block, and we have a proper button tag for our button. Just a note here, when you use a button, make sure that's actually a button that you need. As any semantic tag, a button has a meaning. It's usually used to trigger an action in a form, for example. So make sure that you are using a button when needed and a link when needed. So back to Oxygen. Now let's see how to create the same thing in an easier way using OxyProps. So I will delete everything. Let's recreate the same structure. In my structure panel, I can right click. This opens OxyProps context menu where I have Oxygen elements with a selection of semantic tags that I can apply to these elements. So to create the same structure, I first want an Oxygen section with a tag of section. In this section, I want a heading with a tag of H1. I want a text with a tag of paragraph, and I want a link with a tag of button, and I want a real button. I don't want the Oxygen button. That's not correct semantically. So I will click real button. Let's change the text. And as earlier, to style it like a button, let's add the class o-btn and add some spacing to the section. Okay, let's save. Have a look at the output. So when refreshing, I have my section, the div wrapper, the H1, my text is a p tag, my button is a button tag. So this is correct. Moreover, in my structure tree, I made the choice when you use OxyProps context menu to pre-fill the pretty names of the element with the tag that will be actually rendered on your front-end source code. So I know that this section will have a tag of section and that this text will have a tag of button, which I think is much more readable. And still considering HTML semantic, we can improve this structure because maybe my paragraph text here is a subheading. So let's do this. Give it a class of sub h1, and there exists a tag in HTML that is the Hgroup that you will find on the heading category. It actually is a div Oxygen element, but I will insert it with this tag of Hgroup. Let's take it over and pull my heading and my text inside this Hgroup. And the semantic meaning of this Hgroup is that my H1 and the following paragraph must be considered together as the meaning of my heading. So this is a convenient way to add important keywords to your SEO efforts. Okay, but maybe over our section, we would like to have a header with a navigation. So let's create this, and we will not create a section. If I was creating my header completely from scratch, I will create a section, but I will use the Oxygen header builder that's here. I will drag it to the top, and I will add a header row, and just have a look at the output. Here it is, my header builder has a tag of header. So that's built-in Oxygen element. Perfect. So now let's create our actual navigation. And if we look at the specification for the navigation, you will find that a proper navigation consists of a nav element. And within this nav element, you want an unordered list with list items that will be your navigation links. And it's a real pain to build a proper navigation with the correct semantics in Oxygen. So let's try to do this. So first, let's add to my header row a div with a tag of nav. That will be my navigation. Then let's add a div with a tag of menu. And if you look at the specification, you will find the menu tag and the UL tag. And the specification states that they are completely similar, with the difference that menu is the tag used for a navigation menu with the semantic meaning attached to it. So menu is a UL used for a navigation menu. So we will use a menu, and in my menu, let's add a div with a tag of list item, and inside my list item, let's add a link with an A tag. And this, for example, will be my home. And now let's go to my LI and simply duplicate it. You see that my list item, you see that it's being built. So of course, there is no styling attached to the elements we are creating. That's my standard style sheet that is styling my list item element like list item elements with bullet points. So it will be up to you to style them properly by maybe attaching a custom class or using one of the predefined OxyProps custom class. So maybe this one will be my products, about, shop, and sign in. And let's go to my menu, and let's say it's horizontal, middle aligned with a gap of a size 4, and I will drag my navigation to the right menu. So no more styling, but we just want to have a look at the code that will be output from the structure we just created. So let's refresh our front end. We have our navigation links on top, and if we have a look, we have our header, we have the div that are containers with no meaning, that's perfectly fine, but then we have our nav, and inside our nav we have our menu, and inside our menu we have list items, and inside each list item we have our link exactly as it should be. Just have a look at tab navigation. So let's press tab, and I access my first item. Because of the proper structure, tab navigation works as expected. And the next one, because it's once again properly tagged, it jumps to our button. And back to Oxygen, maybe we want to create a new section. This section will be our main content. So let's create a section with a tag of main. Inside the section, let's create a Hgroup with an H2, a paragraph text that will be a subheading, a sub H2. Let's create a container. This one has no meaning, so it will be a simple div. This will be a grid 3. Let's add a gap. And within my container, I want to create cards. So remember from the specification, an article is something that can exist by itself. That will be the case for my card. So I will add a div with a tag of article. I will give it a class of card2 to style it. My container will have a gap of 4. And my article, as it is a full element by itself, will have a header, and in this header we will have an icon, a heading 3, but it will be within an Hgroup, so heading 3 and a paragraph. My paragraph will be a sub H3 this time. My header will be horizontal, middle aligned, a gap of 4, perfect. In my article I will have a paragraph of text. And then I will have a footer that will be a div footer with a width of 100%. And inside my footer, I will have a link. And let's give all this a bit of room. Let's add a gap of 2. A footer will be right aligned. Perfect. And then I can duplicate my article, save, and let's have a look at the generated code. So we have everything in main section here. So we have our tag of main, we have the inner wrapper, okay, we have our Hgroup. Within the Hgroup we have the H2 and a paragraph. Then we have our grid, and inside the grid we have 3 articles, and each article has a header, a paragraph, and a footer. And in the header we have the icon with no specific meaning, and we have our Hgroup with a H3 and a paragraph. Of course, our paragraph with the text, and the footer with our link. So very easily we did create this section structure in Oxygen with a completely conforming to the specification, semantically correct HTML tags structure. So let's continue. And yesterday, an OxyProps user told me that something very difficult to achieve in Oxygen is building a table with a conform semantic tags. So let's try to do this. Let's add a new section. Let's add a Hgroup, a H2, a paragraph of text with a sub h2. Let's build a table. Pay attention to semantics. Okay, so let's try to do this. So to my section, I will add a table. And I want my table to be full width. I will add some vertical spacing. Okay. So back to my table, I want a caption. Okay. Let's collapse a little the structure 3 so you can have a look at it. So now that I have my table, let's say that I want a 3 columns table, but I want 2 column groups. So let's add a col group. Let's add another col group, and this one will have an attribute of span with a value of 2, meaning that this column group spans over 2 columns. Let's add 3 columns. So Oxygen renders them as divs in the builder, but you will see on the front end that everything will be interpreted correctly by your browser. My second col group, I want to make it visible, so let's give it a background color of surface 2, for example. Now let's add a table head. Inside my table head, I want a table row, and inside my table row, I want titles, th, that are header cells, and inside my th, I want a paragraph of text. Okay. Let's duplicate the th because I want my 3 columns. I can add to my table header a second row, and in the second row I want table cells that will contain some information, so paragraphs of text. That can be a description, for example. Okay. Now let's add a table body. Here it is. In the body, a table row with cells. Inside this first cell, I will have a paragraph of text with 3 sentences. Let's add a second row. And in this row, I can have an unordered list with list items and texts. And I forgot the cell, so let's add the cell and the list inside the cell and duplicate the table cell. Okay. And maybe a last row with cells and an icon. Perfect. And now let's create our table footer with a table row. And I will use th with a text, for example, of total A, and let's duplicate it. Okay, so this is our table in Oxygen Builder. Oxygen doesn't know how to render the columns group, so we can just hide them if we want from the editor. And let's go to the front end and have a look at the result. And here is our table with the 3 columns, and we have our column group here with the surface 2 background that has been applied. Let's look at the output code. So this is our section. We have our Hgroup, heading paragraph. Now we know that. But then we have our table. We have the caption, the column groups, the columns. And I just noticed that I made a mistake. So let's fix this. I need to nest my columns in my column groups. Perfect. Save. The first column group with a column. All this is empty, that's just for formatting purpose. The second column group with a span of 2 and the 2 columns. Then we have our table head with the 2 rows, with the th and the paragraph, our table body and the 3 rows, and our table footer and a footer row. So all this is correct HTML for a table. Back to Oxygen, let's create another section, and maybe this time we want to build a form. So let's try to build a form with correct tags and semantics. Just pay attention that once again, the purpose here is to build an HTML element structure that will be compliant with the standards. But of course, if you want to build a form this way, you will have to create, to code the logic to handle the form. So let's add a form element. Our form will have a full width. And let's create, for example, a text input. Let's give it a width. And for example, let's give it a placeholder of first name. Let's pin it to the front and apply the attributes. This one will be our last name. And let's add a text area. The placeholder, your message here. Apply. Let's give some gap to our form, maybe a size 2. Let's add an email, for example. And maybe we want to add a consent checkbox. So once again, Oxygen doesn't know how to render this checkbox. So of course, this won't be the result on the front end. We will have a look later. And for the checkbox, maybe we want to add, and that's definitely something I need to add to this menu because I want a div, but I don't want a div with a tag of menu. I want a div with a tag of label. So this will be part of the next update. So let's include my checkbox inside the label and add a text. I agree to receive marketing emails. Let's make it horizontal, middle, with a gap of size 2. Let's format this, so make sure that everything is sized properly. Okay. And to finish, let's add a button, a real button, with a text of submit. Let's style it like a button. We could, and maybe that's something I will include in the next update, add an attribute of a type of submit. But this is not necessary because when you are in an HTML form and there is a button element, the button action will be to submit the form. Let's apply, save. And one last time, let's go and have a look at our front end. Let's refresh. And this is our form. You've seen that I didn't apply any styling to the forms element, but because OxyProps normalize is active on this site, it applies default styling to basic HTML elements. So that's why our input uses the site color scheme theme. You see that it also applies the outline, that is the color of our color scheme. The checkbox also uses the color scheme. And if I enter something here, have a look here, and we will see that if we submit, it's actually submitted. So of course, as I told you, it will be up to you to create the logic to handle the form submission, but you can perfectly build a decent form in Oxygen using the correct tag applied to your elements. And this is how you can use Oxygen to create a perfectly correct HTML tag structure, and how OxyProps can help you in this task. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked it, if you learned something, give me a like. Tell me in the comments how you usually build your page. If it's not done yet, consider subscribing to the channel for more videos like this one, and I'll see you in the next video.